This film is based on a true story. After watching it, your faith in humanity will be shaken. So let's begin. This story is set in the 1750s. In the German region of Europe, a child was playing with an infant. Suddenly, his father called him, so he left the baby behind and went away. At that moment, an unknown woman picked up the infant and began walking toward the forest. She reached near a waterfall and dropped the baby down, which was truly horrifying. Later, she went to a church and confessed her crime. As punishment, the woman's neck was cut off, along with the fingers of her hands and feet. Why she confessed after committing the crime, this will be revealed later. Now we see Agnes, who lives with her mother and brother. Today was Agnes's wedding, so they were carrying all the dowry items to another village. The wedding took place with great celebration. Her husband's name was Wolf. The girl was very happy that finally she had her own home. Many rituals were performed at the wedding, one of which was blindfolding the bride and making her aim at a rooster. Wolf blindfolded Agnes and guided her to the spot. Looking at Wolf, it seemed she had found a good life partner. Wolf then showed her his cabin, which was surrounded by nature deep in the forest. This is where they were going to live after marriage. At night, while everyone was celebrating, Agnes saw her husband getting physically close with another man, but she didn't pay much attention to it. Her mother and brother had given Wolf a large dowry. Both of them bid her farewell. Before leaving, her brother gave her a severed finger, which made her happy to see. In fact, this finger belonged to that woman who had been brutally killed. At that time, it was believed that whoever kept a body part of a sinner under their bed would soon conceive a child. Anyway, on the wedding night, Wolf doesn't do anything with her. He quietly comes and lies down to sleep, which feels very strange to Agnes. She was hoping that her husband would love her, but nothing like that happens. Even when she tries to arouse him, he pushes her away and satisfies himself with his own hand before sleeping. By morning, Wolf was nowhere to be seen. She starts looking for him and soon learns that he has already gone to work. She also gets ready and heads there. On the way, she notices a poster telling the story of the lady from the beginning of the movie, how she committed a sin and was punished for it. Then she sees that woman's severed head and torso carefully preserved. Why they were kept preserved, I'll explain later. Meanwhile, Agnes reaches Wolf. He was working with his laborers, handling fish. She starts helping her husband. Just then, the church bell rings, and she begins to pray, which doesn't please her mother-in-law. After work, the laborers are given food. One hungry worker asks for another piece of bread. Agnes, being kind-hearted, gives it to him, but her mother-in-law snatches it back and chases the man away. Agnes feels embarrassed. In the evening, the couple returns home. Agnes milks the goat. While she is cooking, her mother-in-law shows up and starts finding faults in her work, saying, "Why is this vessel kept here? You should hang it." After giving her lecture, she leaves. Agnes puts the vessel back where it was. Later, Wolf comes home, and once again she hopes he will show her love, but once again he disappoints her. He just silently goes to sleep. She tries to arouse him, but it's useless. By midnight, the poor girl is still wide awake, unable to understand why Wolf is treating her this way. Friends, Wolf was actually gay, which we already realized during the time of his marriage. He had no attraction towards women, but maybe just to show society, he got married, because at that time being gay was considered something very dirty. Anyway, Agnes didn't know any of this. She prayed in church to baby Jesus Christ. One time, while doing the laundry, her mother-in-law whispered gossip, saying this lady would never have a child. Back then, for a woman to remain childless was seen as a terrible thing, just like it still often is today. After finishing the laundry, the mother-in-law left. But Agnes stayed back with her friend. They strolled around, passing the time. Without realizing it, she fell asleep. By the time she woke up, it was already evening. She rushed home and saw her mother-in-law serving food she had cooked for Wolf. Agnes tried to help, but her mother-in-law refused to let her do anything. Maybe she was annoyed because Agnes had come home late. Conflicts like this between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law were quite common, nothing unusual. Meanwhile, Agnes wanted a child. But Wolf never touched her, which drove her into depression. To ease her sorrow, she prayed to God, asking him to make her a mother too. One morning, she went fishing alone so that nobody would think of her as useless. But she got stuck in the mud. After some time, Wolf arrived with his laborer and began working. Yet that day, they didn't catch a single fish. One night, someone came and took Wolf away for an emergency. She didn't pay much attention to it, but shortly afterward, she heard the sound of someone crying loudly. She went there and saw that Wolf's other gay companion had hanged himself while his mother wailed in grief. He had taken his life because he knew Wolf and he could never truly be together. Society would never accept a gay couple. Back then, being gay was considered a great sin. In fact, they discarded his body like that of an animal, because the church didn't allow the burial of anyone who had committed suicide. Suicide was considered a big sin. The next day in church it was told that no human has the right to take their own life. This life has been given by God, and only He can take it back. Agnes felt bad seeing the abandoned corpse. One day, while she was working in the field, she suddenly got her period. Anyway, while they were giving bread to the laborers, her friend asked for an extra piece of bread because she was pregnant. But due to her mother-in-law, Agnes refused. One day she became very sad because people had started gossiping that she couldn't have a child. In anger, she bit her own tongue. One evening, the mother-in-law was telling Wolf that marrying Agnes was a mistake. She's of no use. Neither can she bear children, nor can she manage the house properly. Hearing this, Agnes cried. At night, she went near the dead body of that woman and kept staring at it. She had now become a victim of anxiety. In the morning, she went to her mother's house. She shouldn't have lived with Wolf, but her mother and brother told her to go back to her own home. She didn't go inside and sat outside. Her brother called Wolf. Wolf told her to come home, but Agnes resisted. However, her brother handed her over to her husband. The mother-in-law noticed that the goat had gotten an infection. She blamed Agnes for it. Then, the two slaughtered it. Agnes had reached the peak of depression. She was no longer the same. Both were worried about this. Wolf took her to a healer. The healer pushed a wire into her neck, saying that when it was pulled, her focus would shift from anxiety to pain. In those days, this was the kind of treatment done. She once brought someone's child home to fill the void of her own, but they scolded her and told her to return the baby. The mother-in-law insisted that she should bear her own child. But how could she? Her husband wasn't even intimate with her. Anyway, she had to return the child to its parents. She would just lie in the house all day. No help came from God, so she started eating rat poison, which slowly began making her sick. One day, she stole baby Jesus Christ's idol from the church, hoping it would fill the absence of a child, but the statue melted. One day, she found a woman's head buried in the ground, but that turned out to be just a dream. With time, her condition kept getting worse, and she would not stop eating rat poison. One day, she felt the need to make a confession. So, Wolf went to call the father, but when they reached the church, the father was not there. That's why she made her confession right in front of Wolf. She told him how she had been eating rat poison. Hearing this, he became very disturbed. Wolf also got angry at her behavior and left her at her parents' home. Her life was now completely ruined. She had always dreamed of becoming a mother, but that never happened. Because of this, she made a big decision. She went to a child, trapped him in her snare, and brought him here. Then she stabbed this innocent child to death. She didn't want to do this, but she was forced into it. I'll explain everything in detail ahead. Anyway, after that, she went to the church and confessed her crime, her sin. She was kept in a dark cell for some days. Her hair was cut off. Then she confessed to the father how she had killed a child. Hearing her confession, the father forgave her and gave her the blessing of going to heaven. She became very happy, believing that finally she would be freed from this sorrowful world and enter heaven. After that, instead of her poster, a poster of Agnes was placed, which showed her sins and their consequences. Her body was wrapped in animal skin. Then a procession was carried out in the village. where everyone cursed and insulted her. She was made to sit, and Wolf was also there. Finally, her neck was cut off. Wolf felt very miserable about it. Then everyone drank her blood. They believed that by drinking the blood of this sinner, they would be purified. Everyone began dancing and singing because, for them, it was a holy day. We are then shown that in the 17th and 18th centuries, this actually used to happen. Now let's understand it. At that time, if someone committed suicide, they were thrown away like an animal because suicide was considered a sin, and the person was believed to suffer in hell. But if someone killed a child and then confessed in the church, they were sentenced to death, but along with that, the Father would forgive them and bless them to enter heaven. That is why women in those times performed this ritual. Most of the women used to do this work because when they didn't have a child, society wouldn't let them live peacefully. Because of this, they would fall into depression. They lost the will to live. They wanted to commit suicide, but they didn't want to go to hell. So, in order to go to heaven, they performed this ritual. Now, as for Agnes's story, it was inspired by a girl named Eva. And the same thing that happened in Agnes's story had actually happened in Eva's life. Anyway, because of Wolf, this happened with Agnes. If he had been intimate with her and given her the happiness of having a child, then this would never have been her fate. But saying this is much easier than reality. As for Wolf, he was a homosexual. That was his natural condition. He was born that way. But because of society, he was forced to marry. Back then, people hated homosexuals just as much as they do even today. Anyway, how did you like this movie? Do share your opinion in the comments, subscribe to this channel for more stories like this.